Welcome to my week 1 college football reactions. And let me just start off by saying this week did not disappoint whatsoever. There were supposed to be heavyweight clashes, and they were as good as anticipated. There were some upsets, some new stars emerging, and maybe even a few playoff previews. Today we'll recap the biggest games and standout performances from this weekend, ranging from Group of 5 action on Thursday to clashes like Ohio State, Texas, and all the other top 10 matchups from the weekend. So let's dive into this replay for week 1. So we'll start on Thursday night with number 25 Boise State at the University of South Florida. So this game doesn't seem very big when I'm mentioning it, but it is mentionable because this was the first upset of this year. South Florida came away with their first win over a ranked team since 2016, but that's not the storyline. The storyline is that they absolutely dominated Boise, winning 34-7. And the story from the night, in my opinion, was South Florida's quarterback, Byron Brown. Now, you've probably never heard the name Byron Brown before now because, again, he's a South Florida quarterback, so who's going to pay attention to that? On paper, his stats were really good. He threw for 210 yards, added 43 rushing yards, and scored 2 rushing touchdowns. But here's the thing for me, it wasn't the numbers that stood out. He played very well, but it was how he played. Most mobile quarterbacks try to run and then they'll slide or head for the sideline when they get into open space. Not Byron Brown. He lowered his shoulder multiple times running through defenders and set the tone physically. I've never seen a mobile quarterback run the way he did on Thursday, and that impressed me. And that is the kind of attitude that you need to have to energize a team, and Boise really had no answer for that. And then I got to talk about what's my play of the week. And that was USF's fake punt in the third quarter. What they did was they snuck in their backup freshman quarterback at punter, and Boise State didn't even notice. So he threw a 30-yard pass down the field instead of punting. The receiver caught it, broke 3 tackles, and scored a touchdown. And it, in my opinion, was not a trick play. It was the knockout punch, and I really felt that after that play, Boise never had a chance of coming back whatsoever. And so kind of recapping what this means, for South Florida, it really means they're suddenly in the Group of 5 playoff conversation, and I'd argue that they are leading the Group of 5 playoff conversation now. And if they keep playing like this with the physical creativeness and the confidence, they've got a real shot at grabbing that auto bid. And for Boise State, this was a rough start to the post-Ashton Genty era, and they'll still be decent, sure, but after watching this game, I think it's hard to see them reaching anywhere near the level that they were at last year. This was definitely USF's night from start to finish. Byron Brown looks like a star in the making, and for the first time in a long time, the Bulls look like a legit threat to make noise on the national stage. I'm really interested to see what they do this week as they go play number 15 Florida in the Swamp, so it'll be very intriguing to see how they do against a SEC team. So moving into the Saturday games, the first one I'm going to talk about is the game in the noon slot, which was number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State. And this was probably the most anticipated game of the weekend because of the storylines with Arch Manning and Ohio State beginning its title defense and Lee Corso's last show. So from the very start, Ohio State's defense really set the tone again. I don't think they win this game if they don't have the defense to step up the way it did. And the defense came up crucial with 2 huge red zone stops, including a 4th and goal from the 1 where Texas tried to sneak it in with Arch, and those completely swung the momentum. The Ohio State secondary, in my opinion, is going to be the best secondary in the country this year because they were just incredible this weekend, and I think they're going to continue to be incredible based on the talent they have back there. And speaking of that unit, cornerback Jermaine Matthews Jr. came up with a massive interception off Arch in the third quarter that flipped the momentum and really took all the energy out of Texas at that point in time. On the offensive side of the ball for Ohio State, freshman quarterback Julian Sayin didn't put up huge numbers, but he did show flashes of being the elite guy that Ohio State thinks he can be. He made the throws when it mattered, including a 40-yard touchdown pass to Carnell Tate that really put them up 2 scores in the fourth quarter and ended the game at that point. And now I got to give credit where credit is due, though. Texas's defense was really, really good. That's the only reason they were in this game, too. They limited superstar wideout and Heisman candidate Jeremiah Smith to 6 catches for 43 yards and no touchdowns, and they held Sane to only 126 passing yards overall, which, I mean, you can't really ask your defense to do more than that, especially in an environment like the Shoe. The big storyline for Texas here, of course, was Arch Manning making his first career start. And yeah, he definitely struggled for stretches, but honestly, I'm not worried about him long term. It was the kid's first collegiate start. He showed flashes of why the hype was real around him, including a beautiful 32-yard touchdown strike to Parker Livingstone in the fourth quarter. And again, that was his first college start in one of the most hostile environments in the country. I still think he's going to be good, and everyone needs to take a chill pill and remember, this was his first start. This is his first game of the year, and every quarterback never has, it's hard to have a really good game as a quarterback in your first start, especially against someone as good as Ohio State. Bottom line here, both of these teams are elite. Ohio State showed a championship caliber defense, and Texas has proved that their defense can keep them in any game. I still have some minor concerns about Texas's offense, but I think those will be resolved in the coming weeks. Come December, I think these squads will both be in the playoff picture, and don't be surprised if we somehow see this matchup again in the college football playoff. So then, I'm going to move into the 3:30 game from Saturday, which was number 8 Alabama at Florida State. And yeah, this game definitely shocked me a little bit, because Florida State didn't just beat Alabama, they handled them start to finish, as seen by the 31-17 final score. The storyline from this game was Florida State transfer quarterback Tommy Castellanos. His dual threat ability, paired with offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn's play calling, had the Alabama defense on its heels the entire afternoon. Whether it was extending plays or attacking on the ground, Castellanos kept the Tide guessing. And as for the ground game, Florida State just dominated the trenches, which I didn't really expect. They ran for 230 yards while holding Alabama to just 87 yards at 3 yards a carry. And that is how you win a football game. And let's not overlook this Seminoles defense either. With new defensive coordinator Tony White, the ex-Nebraska defensive coordinator, calling the shots, this retooled Seminoles defense was flying around and now looks like a real strength on their team. Considering where their defense was at last year and looking at it now, it's crazy how much White has transformed it and kind of put them way above and beyond where I thought they would be. Now, don't get me wrong, Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson deserves some credit here. In his first start, he threw for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns while not turning it over, and he definitely battled to keep his team alive throughout the day. But Alabama was playing from behind all day, and it never felt like they were in control after that dominant first drive. Big picture, this game puts Alabama in a really tough spot. Kalen DeBoer is only in his second season, but this performance turns up the heat on his seat. He definitely has not been as good as Saban, which he never was going to be, but he also has not been as good as I expected him to be, especially with the resources, so he's got a lot to prove this year. And beyond the scoreboard, Alabama looked really flat. They always play with energy, and that just wasn't there. The body language was not great. And for a program built on intensity and culture like it is, that's a very big concern of mine. And combine that with this loss, and their playoff hopes just took a serious hit. On the flip side, Florida State suddenly looks like a legit ACC contender after going 2-10 last year, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see them in the ACC title game. They keep playing this brand of football, physical in the trenches, creative on offense, and tough on defense. They're going to be a problem for the ACC and everyone they play the whole season. So I kind of have them on my radar for a dark horse playoff team right now. Then moving into the nightcap for Saturday night, it was number 9 LSU at number 4 Clemson. And wow, LSU gave a week 1 statement. The Tigers rallied in the second half to beat Clemson 17-10, which was their first season opening win since the 2019 national championship run, which is kind of crazy to think of that. And let me tell you, the real story here was not what I expected. The real story was LSU's defense. Cade Klubnik and the Clemson offense never got comfortable, as Klubnik finished for just 50% passing for under 250 yards, threw an interception, and didn't score a touchdown. LSU's defensive line was relentless. Even with only 2 sacks, Klubnik was running for his life for what felt like the entire game. And Clemson's rushing attack was held to just 31 yards. That's how you control the game, and that's what LSU did. They retooled the defensive line in the offseason through the portal, and it was as good as advertised. And honestly, that's not what I or a lot of people expected, considering the Tigers' defense has been a weakness for the past couple of years. Offensively, LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier was as advertised. He managed the game perfectly, and even getting better as the game went on, especially in the second half, and kept Clemson off balance and while contemplating that dominant defense. LSU really controlled the clock in the second half, holding it all but 9 minutes, stayed patient, and never really gave Clemson a chance. Looking at the big picture now, LSU looks like a legit playoff contender and SEC contender for the first time in a couple years. They can play like this constantly. They're going to be in the conversation for November and beyond. I'm really intrigued to see how they match up against the SEC once conference play begins, because if they replicate this performance against other elite SEC teams, this could be the year. Clemson, I have my concerns. They came into this season favored for the ACC, but after performances this weekend, I don't feel confident in that anymore. LSU really exposed serious issues with Clemson's offensive and defensive line, which is concerning because LSU was not supposed to win either of those areas in this game. And this is also Clemson's 7th straight loss to a ranked SEC opponent, and that raises questions for me as to whether they can compete at the highest level if they hope and reach a national title game, because you got to be able to beat SEC teams because they're going to be there. And then transferring into the Sunday night game, which was, in my opinion, game of the week, was number 6 Notre Dame at number 10 Miami. And they went toe-to-toe on Sunday night, and it had all of the elements of a classic and was a fantastic game start to finish. Notre Dame's quarterback C.J. Carr made his first career start. He definitely didn't disappoint. He threw for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns, had a pick, and even added a rushing touchdown. And he definitely had his freshman moments and his freshman mistakes, but that's to be expected in this situation. He did look calm, composed, and ready for the most part. So I think that's a very good sign for Notre Dame throughout this year. Miami's Carson Beck looked like the 2023 version of himself, which is great to see. He looked very comfortable, confident, and was very clearly having fun throughout the game. He threw for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns and delivered when it mattered most. Miami really controlled the crucial 8-minute stretch between the end of the first half and the start of the second half with back-to-back 75-yard touchdown drives. On the drive that ended the first half, Miami wide receiver C.J. Daniels made a jaw-dropping one-handed catch in the end zone to get that score, and honestly, that pass would have been picked off if he hadn't made that catch. And those 2 drives were where I really felt that Miami had the game in hand. However, Notre Dame didn't go away. Carr led a second half comeback, bringing the game even at 24 apiece with 3:21 left in the fourth. However, in true veteran fashion, Carson Beck showed his experience and stepped up in the clutch. With under 2 minutes left, he led Miami down the field and set them up in field goal range for a field goal with about a minute left that the kicker drilled and gave Miami the 27-24 victory. My big picture takeaways from this game are that these teams are going to win a lot this season. Notre Dame's offense looks improved, and they have the strong signature Marcus Freeman defense. So they'll be in the playoff conversation come November. Miami, I call them my ACC favorite right now. I really did not expect them to look this good, and they blew me out of the water. They looked incredible on both sides of the ball and seemed poised for the ACC title race along with a playoff berth. This was a great matchup between 2 top 10 teams and a good way to end the weekend, and it was another great addition to the Catholics versus Convicts rivalry. So now to kind of close this out, I want to jump off into some notable performances from week 1 that I didn't mention from teams in this video. First up is Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer. He transferred in from Washington State and was absolutely on fire in their first game. He completed 30 of 37 passes for 392 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he even added a rushing touchdown on top of that. Efficiency and explosiveness were all there for him, and I really think he could be a Heisman contender if he keeps playing this well. Iowa State's Rocco Becht, as much as it pains me to say, was ridiculously good on Saturday. He went 19 of 20 for 278 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I have to shout out Iowa State's kicker Kyle Conradi because he made a statement of his own with a 63-yard field goal, which was a school record, which is not something you see every week. And I'm very nervous as an Iowa fan going into the Iowa State game this week. Over at Arizona State on Saturday night, Sam Leavitt had a strong showing, throwing for 257 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also rushing for 73 yards and another 2 scores. And his wide receiver Jordan Tyson was a machine as well, with 12 catches for 141 yards and 2 touchdowns. That duo made the Sun Devils offense look as explosive as it was last year, as they look to have as good of a season, if not better, than they did. Michigan's running back Jamal Haynes ran wild, putting up 159 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 16 carries while being ridiculously efficient. And finally, on Friday against Colorado, Georgia Tech's Haynes King showed off his dual threat ability, throwing for 143 yards and rushing for 156 yards with 3 total touchdowns. He completely carried the offense on his back and was the reason they won that game. Week 1 definitely gave us some good individual performances, and these players remind us why we like college football. Big plays, big numbers, and players showing up when it matters. And looking ahead for week 2 for some of the things I'm going to cover, first thing is USF is traveling to face Florida on Saturday afternoon. After that win against Boise State, USF is riding high, but this is a completely different challenge because they have to play an SEC team. So I'm intrigued to see how Byron Brown and the Bulls stack up against DJ Lagway and the Gators. At 11 on Saturday morning, we have the Iowa versus Iowa State Cyhawk game. Very excited for this, as I'm an Iowa fan. And Iowa State's coming off 2 really good games, and Iowa's looking to build. So it'll be a very good addition to the rivalry, and it'll go down to the wire as it always does. This game's going to be one in the trenches, so I'm hoping that my team can come out on top. Arizona State travels to Mississippi State in a good early season test for the Sun Devils, who are looking to build off that impressive 2024 year. Leavitt and Tyson have been electric, but Mississippi State's defense greatly improved, so they got to keep momentum rolling here, and Arizona State's got to win this game on the road to keep building off last year. And then finally, in my game of the week, Michigan heads to face Oklahoma in a game that will probably have playoff implications down the line. Jamal Haynes showed he can dominate the run game, and Michigan's offensive line looks strong. However, this is the true test for Michigan star quarterback Bryce Underwood. This one isn't going to be easy, especially after Oklahoma's John Mateer showed what he can do last week. And this one's really just going to come down to the wire, and I have no idea who's going to come out here. Week 2 is really shaping up to be a thriller, and we've got a lot on the line here. Definitely not as many good matchups as this week, but still enough that I can cover stuff for next week.